What happens at the intersection of technology and humanity? And could that intersection be a window into our future as both humans and leaders? I'm Charles Araujo, and you're watching the Transform IT Show, presented by the Intel IT Center. I'm really excited about today's episode. In fact, today is a 2-for-1 special. A little while ago, I traveled to New York City to interview James Jorasch and Rita J. King, a powerhouse couple and founders of Science House, one of the most unique places I've ever visited. They are inventors, creators, and futurists who have some very interesting ideas about how our future is about to unfold, and it has some dramatic implications for all of us as both business and IT leaders. If you're watching this episode at airtime, don't forget to participate in our live Twitter chat. Use hashtag #ITChat to join in. And if you're not, make sure you tune in live next time to participate in the conversation. All right, buckle in. It's going to be a wild ride as we reach the intersection of technology and humanity. We are here today with James Jorasch and Rita J. King, the founders of Science House. Rita and James, welcome to the Transform IT Show.
Thank you so much.
So I'm so excited about this conversation. There is just so much to talk about that I almost don't know where to start. But let's start here with the actual name of Science House. You guys, I founded Science House I think a couple of years ago, right? And when we first met, you explained that you saw Science House and kind of really your entire work as the intersection of humanity and technology. And I just found that so fascinating. So why don't you explain just a little bit of what that means?
Well, a lot of it is about looking at kind of machines and man and how they work together. And so a lot of the work that I've done, for example, in the inventing side has been looking at how people interact with machines, whether that's a vending machine or a point of sale terminal or whatever. So that interaction, that combination, and that touch point between man and machine is what I found very interesting and what I've done a lot of work in. So that's been sort of a fascination of mine. And I think, look, going forward, the world is just getting much more complicated every day. And those touch points, it's you up against an algorithm, are going to happen all the time going forward. So we got to understand that.
So better. You and an algorithm. I was told I can't ask you about chess because that will just send us off on this crazy tangent.
No, we cannot go down this.
Okay, we're not going to talk. Rita, how about you? What's your take on it?
Well, I like to focus on the mindset because right now technology sits outside us, but this is really the last time in human history I think that it will. So right now we perceive technology we're human, technology is over there, but it's getting smaller and faster and increasingly permeating everything we do. So there's a lot of fear, understandably, and some of that is very warranted, but I like to focus on cultivating the mindset of collaboration between humans and machines so that we can create things that solve problems for humans and humans capture the value.
Let's back up a little bit. How did your respective backgrounds lead you to this point? How did you get here?
Well, I'll say that for the last 15 years before Science House, I was doing inventing work. So it was a lot of brainstorming sessions and imagining the future, right? Thinking about what people are going to want in the future.
But just to put that in context, I mean, you came to that because you were kind of living that, right? I mean, you were part of the .com. I mean, so just very briefly, what was your background there as far as that brought you here?
So I joined a company called Walker Digital. I worked for Jay Walker starting in 1995, and it was a small sort of think tank that had a number of inventors. We came up with ideas, we found patents on those ideas, and then we launched businesses around them. So Priceline was one of those businesses that we spun off among a number of others. But it was a team that was just constantly looking at the market, looking at different industries and saying, well, what's that going to look like 5, 10, 15 years from now? And what are people going to want? And how do we make that better? And then how do you instantiate that in a patent or in a brand new business that we launch?
And what I find fascinating is that I think you guys have ended up kind of at the same place or very similar place, and yet your background is actually very different from that, right? So how did that come?
My road here was very serendipitous and adventurous. When I graduated from college in 1996, I was driving from New York to California. And my car just kept breaking down, and it broke down in Albuquerque, and I ended up in a bookstore, and I heard people talking about the fact that AOL was opening a call center in Albuquerque. So I thought, I should probably learn how to use the internet. So I applied for a job at America Online, and of course, after one day I quit because I am not the person that you want on the phone.
One whole day.
Well, I lasted a day, which I credit myself for, because I'm not the person on the phone that you want if something's going wrong with your computer. However, they hired me as basically a vulgarity censor, and I ended up writing a cover story for the Village Voice about this. And the focus of that piece was about terms of service and how corporate terms of service were, people thought they have First Amendment rights, free speech on the internet, but the impact of anonymity really struck me as an emerging dynamic that was going to radically change society, and that really informed the rest of my career. From there, I was a journalist for years, and I focused on large systems. I love the moving pieces of large systems. So the nuclear industry, the relationship between corporations and the government, AI, anything related to technology and people. And so at the same time, though, I had accidentally started a business writing stories about people's lives for private use and families.
Accidentally.
It was accidental. Yeah. I met a World War II veteran at a bar, and he was talking about how his sons really wanted him to talk about his experiences as a combat veteran, but veterans don't like to talk about those things. So I said I would write an essay for him that he could give to them. So for a long time, I was a journalist and I was writing stories about people's lives. So my brain was constantly toggling between huge systems and the component parts of those systems, as well as the role of the individual in those systems. And then in 2006, IBM hired me to investigate them about the business value of how they were using the internet. And that launched a whole new phase of my career and the imagination age.
Explain what the imagination age is and how it all plays together.
So after IBM, I started working with lots of big companies and senior leaders of big companies to understand how to navigate the rapid change in the business landscape. The real issue is you have the industrial era mindset. So when it comes to IT, there's always this legacy technology problem, but there's also a legacy mindset problem. The industrial era is over here, and it was very tangible and heavy. So jet engines, classrooms where the bell rings and everybody gets up and moves, conveyor belts, and people were educated to be factory workers or bosses at that time. It was a pretty easy design aesthetic, and people understood what they were dealing with. And over here you have the intelligence era, which is largely intangible, invisible, made of software, algorithms, code, the ubiquitous big data, which is really smart data, because lots of data without understanding how to parse it out is meaningless. So it's very difficult to take an industrial era legacy mindset and just keep going faster and faster and faster and shove it over into an intelligence era mindset. So I noticed across industries, all of the leaders I was working with had the same problem. And faster and faster and faster simply isn't going to work. We're still human. Our hardware has not upgraded as quickly as the software that is our culture and our business landscape. So I created the imagination age as a period in between. It sounds whimsical, but really imagination is the workspace of our brains. It is how our neurons make connections between ideas now. So it seemed like a great bridge concept between these two longer eras to say, in this period, we really need to understand what it means to be human, because only in understanding what it means to be human can we start to collaborate with technology, with software, to use math, use data to start solving human problems and spot opportunities. So it's a chance to take a breath. As quickly as we're moving forward, we also need to stop and take a breath.
The thing that I know that when you were explaining this to me the first time that you said is that as we transition to these eras, the imagination age is kind of our opportunity to seize control of our own destiny, to be imagining the future that we want and to create it. And I thought that was actually really powerful. One of the things I love about the two of you is that you kind of represent I think the two sides of my life, because I grew up being a techie kind of guy, and then I started realizing this is great, but it's really all about the people, and so my whole career has shifted that direction. And you guys kind of personify all of the coming together. I think the other thing that's fascinating is that when we first met you, we had nothing to do with IT, and then we discover, oh my gosh, you guys are now working with a bunch of IT organizations trying to solve a lot of the same issues that we've been working around trying to solve. So how, as you've been working with these IT organizations, how have you seen this idea of the imagination age playing out or affecting them in some ways?
The industrial era, the era of physical things, is very easy for the brain to understand. I mean, this physical object, right? 1,000,000 years ago, our brains were optimized to understand objects. But algorithms, code, numbers, that's just not what our brains adapted for. And so we've built all these systems, all these corporate systems, the rules of a company, around kind of physical processes. But now we're in a time frame in an era where it's about the algorithms, it's about the software. And suddenly our brains don't have anything to kind of grab onto. And it's a very different kind of management approach that you need to bring about these radical transformations and real improvements on the software side. Because it's about the intelligence, right? And sometimes one software engineer can do the work of 50 software engineers, if you find the right one. But how do you find the right one? How do you interview for them? How do you manage these people? These are much more difficult and complicated tasks when it's about something as ephemeral as an algorithm. You know, in the old days, if you're hiring a finance guy, you can say, here's exactly what their background is, they know, all this kind of stuff. It's fairly straightforward. Not nearly so straightforward on the IT side.
Part of getting smarter as we head into the intelligence era is getting smarter about people. So a lot of what we see is consensus-driven decision-making, for example. Everyone gets put in the room and everyone's nodding, oh, that sounds like a great idea, right? And then everyone's frustrated because nothing gets done. But as long as you respect the person who had the idea, I would argue part of the leadership change in the imagination age is understanding how to redefine something like respect. Respect doesn't just mean nodding when someone's talking and then knowing in your mind you're not going to do anything as a result of the conversation. It's understanding what the mission of the group is and really motivating people and understanding people on a deep level. What makes them want to participate in the mission? And what a lot of companies are facing is that the value that they're used to offering to society isn't valuable to their customers anymore. So if it's not valuable to your customers, you can't reasonably expect your workforce, your ecosystem of collaborators to be excited and enthusiastic about getting out of bed in the morning and working. And as the world changes, that's something leaders really need to deal with.
So briefly, I know one of the things that you guys are also doing a lot of work with, and it's related to all this within specifically IT organizations, although I know it's broader than that, is this idea of culture and what you guys call culture mapping. So just briefly kind of explain how you see all that fitting into this.
Well, culture tends to be very nebulous. The language around culture is nebulous. People take for granted the culture that they're in and they rapidly assimilate to that culture. We are conditioned from birth to just accept whatever culture we're born into as a fact, and we just start layering it into our reality, and we have elastic brains. And companies have the same exact problem. So anytime you have a culture, anytime two people start interacting, a culture starts emerging. So in the imagination age, leaders have to design the culture intentionally instead of letting it emerge by default. It's a very big mistake to let culture emerge by default. That's something I've worked on with leaders for a long time, but last year, Dr. Simon Sagmeister came to Science House and he had a tool. And everybody has a tool. So I told James, go work in your office, don't even come downstairs. If it's good, I'll let you know later. I texted him within 30 seconds of seeing this that he should come downstairs right now because it was the simplest tool I had ever seen, and the only tool I've ever seen for creating an agile culture. So instead of saying, this is your culture forever now, it enables us to map in a very simple color-coded system the current state of the culture, the desired future state of the culture, and then using a system that's a mix of James's work as an inventor and my work understanding people and Simon's system to rank and prioritize the key action items that will start moving the culture in that direction, with the understanding that it's always a work in progress. So we think about software as a process of design. Why isn't culture similar to software? You know, you can design a culture that's constantly being upgraded and changed and moved around, and there's moving pieces, and this enables us to work with them to say, here's what it looks like, here's what you want it to look like.
Let's make this a little bit more personal. You guys are referred to by a whole bunch of different monikers, personas, futurists, inventors, investors, I mean, clearly in the traditional sense, but I think also in a more esoteric sense of investors in people and in ideas, right? And I think that as we look forward, I mean, certainly my vision of where the future of IT is going, and even broader, the future of business in general, is that it is actually those same skills that people are going to have to embrace. To your point, they have to become much less robotic and be much more engaged in how they're creating new ideas. So from your own personal lives and your own experiences, are there anything specific that stand out that helped you? I mean, I'd like to think that you guys weren't just born amazingly brilliant, at least for my own sake. I hope that means there's hope, right? That we can all start embracing some of this. So I mean, from your own lives, how did you develop this perspective?
My perspective on inventing, at least, I think it's it's a great skill to have in the world of IT, partly because it just forces you to think about what the customer or the end user really needs and their experiences. So it's thinking about the most mundane of transactions and just put yourself in the shoes of that other person. A lot of companies talk about, well, we're customer focused. And we hear that a lot, but when you start asking them questions about, well, exactly who are their customers and how do they behave and what do they like, what are the emotions being experienced by their customers? Sometimes they start not giving as many answers at that point. So I think that inventing really forces you really can't invent unless you can step into the shoes of that end user and that customer, understand what they really want, what drives them. I mean, getting back to what Rita said, I mean, as a human being, you are driven largely by your emotions. And if you don't understand those emotions in a customer, then you don't really understand the customer. Organizations should be bringing in customers, like to talk with software engineers. Really watch them
Revolutionary
try to
idea.
use the software. I mean, look, some large companies, Microsoft, of course, brings people in to try out the new versions of Word or Excel. But I think that can be done on a bigger scale and done more often. And it's more than just watching someone try to use the product. It's really pulling out those emotions, and it's a tricky thing to do, and that's part of what Rita's skill is, like reading people and getting them to feel comfortable, almost being a combination of an inventor and a psychotherapist.
So I want to hold you a little bit on this. I mean, first of all, I completely agree. I was interviewing for an article I wrote the general manager of a hotel that I stay at all the time. And we were drinking wine together, and he found out I was in IT, and he just let loose on me. And his core message was, he says, if the people in IT would literally just come and spend one day with me to see how I use this technology to try to take care of my guests, it would change everything. And so it is about, I think sometimes we try to create these little focus groups, and it's too narrow. It's about getting out there and the experience.
That's what I was going to say. Actually, for me, the answer to your question is I just do lots of stuff. I don't think that anyone is necessarily born more creative than anyone else. I think one of the biggest mistakes we make in business is assuming that there are the creatives over there with their zany socks and hairdos, and over here the people in the suits and ties. If you are accepting money from a company to perform work, and you don't consider yourself creative, you really are endangering your livelihood. You need to be creative, and creativity is the ability to connect things. And the more broadly you experience the world, doing things that you never would have thought you would do, you're a tourist or you're an explorer, And I think if you're a tourist in the world, you're going to go where you think you need to go, and you're going to feel the emotions you think you're supposed to feel when you get there. I mean, the example I always use is the Eiffel Tower. How many people go and they know how they're going to feel when they get to Paris, and they stand in front of the Eiffel Tower and look at Instagram, how many millions of pictures there are, selfies in front of the Eiffel Tower. You know before you go how you're supposed to feel. And there's millions of examples like that in life. But if instead you treat life like an exploration, like a story, and not just that you're the hero in your own story, but everyone is potentially the hero in their own story, how are you helping them, and how are they collaborating with you? And if everyone was focused on finding some sort of meaning in their day-to-day activities, business would improve dramatically, because people would be invested in the process and they would believe in what they were doing. And it's not just something superficial. It's not just a message that you give people. It's really motivating people to explore the world and their role in it. We have big problems that we need to solve together, and science plays a role in that, and art plays a role in that, and business plays a role in that. In my opinion, everything else is sort of under those three umbrellas in some way.
So are you telling me that I'm the only guy that went to Paris and the Eiffel Tower and I didn't take a picture of myself, and I'm really weird because of that?
I congratulate you.
So I'm curious about something. Do you, and I know you guys are married, but it's okay for you to disagree. Do you agree with?
No, it's not okay.
No, it's not okay. Okay, well. I mean, so because I think this is an interesting question. I talk about creativity in the IT world a lot. I mean, what about and again, I want to kind of get to the real James deep down as far as, do you consider yourself a creative person? And if so, were you always, or did you have to create that or develop that? And how'd you do it if you did?
I would say my creativity is normal, average. The key, I think, is to really get outside, to not look inward, but to look outward. So if you're at a company and you're doing medical devices, don't study, you need to study medical devices, but don't limit yourself to that. And a lot of people, they go to conferences on their industry. They'll read books about their industry or journals about their industry. They'll talk to, their friends are in their industry. And when you do that, you're not connecting enough ideas. And so what you really need to do is read a magazine about golf, or go to a conference that's about the book publishing industry, or take on some new task, learn something completely unrelated, and then try to start to connect the dots. I'm not a big fan of that term, but I do believe a lot of creativity is loading your head up with things from all over the planet, basically, and shake, kind of.
And allowing them to mix.
And you'll find, right, they'll start to mix. Because so many times an innovation in an industry came from outside and got kind of transplanted and pulled into that industry. So you got to keep your eye looking outside and seeing those things out there. So, every company, I think, should have a few people on staff whose job is to say, we're looking out there and we want to grab something. We see some new thing, new technology, new algorithm, new whatever. Grab it, pull it in, work it into your company, and just keep doing that.
Well, you said it's okay for us to disagree, so I guess I will disagree. I will disagree with James, who says that his creativity is average. It's not. And the reason it's not, and I know what he means by that. He means anyone can do what he's doing. So I do agree with that part. But what makes him more creative than almost anyone I've met in my life is that he's open-minded, and we're both improv people. So we see an opportunity and we feel it out. And there may be something we learned here and something we learned here that we bring together. And we do have very different perspectives. We're very similar at our core, but we're very different on the edges. And it's very dynamic, because ultimately we both have the same goals and we want the same things, and we want Science House to go in the same direction, and we both are working on, we're very, very tight at the core. And I guess this is another leadership characteristic of the imagination age. It is okay to disagree. In fact, it's great to disagree, and it's that initial discomfort at disagreement that makes people quiet. But if you're respectfully candid with people, and you admit when you don't know something, or you ask questions, or you do disagree, you get your thinking challenged. And if you're not so sure that you're right about things, and you don't need to be right or wrong, but instead you have the shared goal of getting somewhere more interesting together, you have great conversations and you push your thinking, right. And he's great at that. And
I think that could almost be, rather than creativity, it's more curiosity.
Yes.
If you have the curiosity, you're going to start pulling that information in. There's creativity everywhere too. And if I tell people, do something creative, that could be doing a painting, but it could be stamp collecting. But if you do stamp collecting, really do it. That's the key. Right. And that's kind of the key to deliberate practice. It takes 10,000 hours to be a master of something. Well, it's not exactly 10,000 hours. It's 10,000 hours spent in deliberate practice, which means things like work on your weaknesses. And deliberate practice should be very hard. Instead of playing the guitar and just playing songs, it's about playing the scales and really the drills. Right. And so I think for people who want to develop their creativity, you can do anything. Look, creating Zen gardens out of rocks, or teaching your kid science. Whatever you do, there's creativity and intelligence and interesting things everywhere.
And everyone
just
in
find
the
them
room
and keep digging.
has something they can teach you. This idea that I need to be the smartest person in the room, you're never going to be the smartest person in the room, because everyone in that room is smarter than you at something. So if you come into the room and listen, and you want to learn from everyone else what it is you don't know already, rather than making sure everyone knows what you know already, you learn from each other and you grow. And I think the core of our marriage and our business and everything is we're in a state of constantly learning, and we're not experts at anything. No, but in today's world, with everything changing constantly, thinking that you are an expert is dangerous.
That's the reality. Too many companies think, well, we got it figured out, and we're all set, and we're just going to continue down this path. But that's just not the way it's going to work. The world's changing so fast. The minute you think you know what you're doing, your competitor, right at that moment, is moving past you.
I always have my favorite phrase. I always tell people, if I'm the smartest person in the room, then I'm in the wrong room. Right?
Right.
So, all right. So we need to bring this to a close, and I think that I think you both have a very fascinating perspective, and you certainly have some. And I actually think you hit on it, right? You have some very strong ideas about where the future is going or what the future holds, and yet, to a large extent, the big message is we can shape that future, and it's not really known. It's not like you have this really finite vision. This is exactly what's going to happen. It's this idea of where things are going, and yet we're in control. So, if you're speaking here to the future IT leaders, what is the one thing that they can and should be doing tomorrow to put themselves on this path, a path similar to yours, where they can kind of gain this perspective and this outlook that will help them be better leaders in the future?
Well, what kind of future do they want to live in? And then are they constantly moving in the direction of the future they want to live in? I mean, that's how we run Science House. Every time a client comes here, the question we really ask is, if they win, are they creating the kind of future we envision wanting to live in? So it isn't like we have a set picture of what that future looks like, but we know what we don't want in it when we see it, and we know what we do want in it when we see it. So if a potential client comes to us and they're working toward the future that we think makes more sense, we are totally committed to that. So as an IT person, if your goal is to if you're an IT person writ large, meaning you can move between companies, then you pick a company that's in the business of whatever future you want to be in. If what you're asking is for an IT person at a specific company, then the answer is they better understand the business that company is in really, really well.
So that's great. I say a lot of the same things sometimes, but it's hard for people to get their arms around that. So I mean, James, specifically, I mean, you're a tactical guy. Like, what tomorrow, right? They wake up in the morning and they should go do this.
Look, IT isn't just the part of the company that, it's not a cost center. It's not the part of the company where the business side wants something, they go to IT, they do it, and they hand it off. Going forward, IT really needs to be leading the company, and that's a very different kind of perspective shift. And to do that, it's going to take, as Rita was saying, an awful lot of conversations and an understanding of the rest of the company. These IT people need to know, what is HR doing? What is finance doing? And how is IT going to transform that? Because that's going to be the key to transformation in all business, is going to come through IT. These algorithms will touch everything.
Every company is a tech company now.
Right. There's no exceptions. And if you think that there's some department, if you think HR they don't really need all that much tech, they do. Every department needs it. They don't think they need it, okay, but you can create algorithms that will make their business so much better, so much more efficient, that will allow your company to survive. So I would say the first thing I would do would be meet with the heads of all the other departments and start to really understand, interview them, ask them questions. What are the challenges? What are the problems? Where do they spend most of their time? And then start to think about, well, all these new IT tools that we have, and it's mobile and it's cloud and it's AI, how are those things going to be used to solve those problems and to move them forward? And that's a challenge, but we really got to get going and do it. The companies that survive are the ones that can do that.
All right, Rita, I'm going to give you the last word because I know you're going to take it anyway.
Am I that predictable?
You are that predictable.
What is it that the one thing in the morning that everyone after watching this should go do tomorrow to start putting themselves on this path?
Something different than they did yesterday. Surprise themselves. Just do something anything. It doesn't matter how simple. I would say simpler the better. Go have an adventure. It could be just going someplace you've never been in your own neighborhood, reading a book outside your normal area, talking to a person in a way talk to a stranger. Start with that. Go talk to a stranger.
Perfect. Thank you both very much. It has been a pleasure to have you on the show. You're two of my favorite people to talk to, so thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wasn't that an intriguing conversation with a couple of brilliant people? I mean, I love how they just look at things so differently and challenge us to really imagine what the future may hold for us and how it may be dramatically different than the world in which we now live. Their big message is that we are in the middle of a transitional time as we move from the industrial era to what they call the intelligence era, putting us smack in the middle of what they call the imagination age, a time in which we are free to imagine our own future. That's powerful, and it can be a bit overwhelming. But the key takeaway is that what we are living through right now represents a fundamental shift. This is not just your run-of-the-mill change. This is big, perhaps even life-changing. But also that we are in control of our changing future. But to take control, we must be willing to challenge ourselves, to surprise ourselves, and even to have an adventure. It is only through those different and challenging experiences that we will gain the perspective that we need to imagine our own future. And that's your challenge. What future do you want to exist for yourself? What can you do to shape it? And what will you do tomorrow to surprise yourself and begin that new adventure? If you've joined us live, share your morning action with us right now using the hashtag #ITChat, or post your morning action in the comments section here. Also, don't forget to take advantage of the many resources we've made available for you. Visit the Intel IT Center at www.intel.com/IT Center, and also check out our programs at the IT Transformation Institute at www.transformingit.org. Finally, don't forget to take advantage of the special offer from Intel to get a copy of my book, The Quantum Age of IT, Why Everything You Know About IT is About to Change, for 50% off, just because you watch the Transform IT show. And if you're one of the first to register for the next show, you might get your copy for free. So that's today's episode of the Transform IT show. Thanks for joining me, and make sure you join me 2 weeks from now to participate in our live chat while you watch the next episode. I'm Charles Araujo, and together we can change the world of IT.